The other thing I wanted to talk about related to Iran is this article from the Financial Times, because this one's just funny. And again, I like to get my I told you so's in every once in a while as well. This is U.S. defense groups to meet Donald Trump as missile production struggles. What a surprise. Our $1 trillion military industrial complex is unable to actually produce the weapons of death that it needs in order to wage wars of pedo aggression across the world. What a surprise. Who could have predicted that? Oh yeah, obviously. The administration is seeking to rebuild conventional weapons stockpiles while regearing for modern warfare. U.S. defense contractors are struggling to meet Pentagon demands to boost munitions production amid a rush to replenish missile stockpiles depleted in the Iran war. The backlog in U.S. weapons manufacturing is expected to dominate a White House meeting on Wednesday between Donald Trump and top American defense companies. The president has exorciated the companies for putting money into dividends and share buybacks rather than expanding production. But on Monday said they can't do that anymore. Dude, yeah, their goal is not to make missiles. Their goal is to funnel as much of that money into the hands of as few pedo billionaires as they possibly can. That is the entire purpose of our military industrial complex. And guess what, Donald Trump? You can't change that. There's nothing you can do, buddy. Like, I'm sorry. Unless you literally want to seize them and take them under ownership of the government, you can't do anything about it. And he's not going to do that because that would make a couple billionaires and Epstein affiliates mad. At issue is the administration's effort to rebuild conventional weapons stockpiles at the same time it regears munitions production for modern warfare, seeding a new generation of defense companies to produce drones and other simple low-cost systems. Lockheed Martin broke ground last month on a new facility in Alabama, while fellow primary contractors Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, and L3 Harris are also investing billions of dollars in expanding their manufacturing footprints. Wow, they're going to be able to go from making 10 missiles a year to making 11 missiles a year. I'm going to be so impressed when they finally do it. But the companies and their suppliers face obstacles ranging from procurement regulations and uneven government spending to chronic shortages of vital components and qualified labor. Yeah, and also you have to, retune or like redesign and retune your thing and create hundreds of contracts that don't go anywhere as well. According to PwC research, the 5 largest so-called U.S. defense primes had a combined backlog of undelivered orders of $1.36 trillion through 2025, up 24% on the year before. And guess what? Throwing more money at it is not going to solve the problem. In fact, it might make it even worse. Jen Stewart, unfortunately named Jen Stewart, Executive Vice President at the National Defense Industrial Association. I was like, why is Jon Stewart making an appearance here? Which represents U.S. defense companies, said there was a bipartisan consensus in Washington over the necessity for speed and reducing barriers to letting the companies go faster. Yeah, it's too bad. Under capitalism, it's impossible. It's just straight up impossible. They would need to go to a China model. That's the only way that they could do this. But they're not going to do that because then our pedo billionaires can't make, ungodly amounts of money. So they're never going to do it. But she added that the shriveling of the U.S. defense industrial base, which had 51 prime contractors in the early 1990s, but just 5 today, took 30 years to accumulate, and it's not going to be solved in 1 year. It's not going to be solved ever. Bitch, come on. The Pentagon did not, Lady Jon Stewart, come on. The Pentagon did not respond to a request for comment on the White House meeting, which will also be attended by the UK's BAE Systems. But the Trump administration has described its mission as putting the U.S. defense industry back on wartime footing. That will require transformation of what Stacey Pettyjohn, director of the defense program of the Center for a New American Security think tank in Washington, described as an invisible industrial base of small suppliers for critical materials and components. Dude, it's never going to work, man. Why are these people so stupid? Why are they unable to see the obvious, man? It's so easy to understand. If you just break out of the confines of like liberalism and break out of the confines of like capitalism, like you can solve these problems. They are solvable. It's just impossible under capitalism, but they're like just incapable of doing that. These companies struggle to raise capital for investments in new equipment, tooling, or capacity, especially when one year the U.S. government wants to buy 50 Tomahawks and the next year they want to buy 1,000. The U.S. domestic manufacturing base that underpins the primes is really in a pretty poor state, Pettyjohn said. You cannot just surge production of one or two components. You have to fix the entire system. The Trump administration has awarded longer 7-year framework agreements for munitions purchases in order to give defense primes and their suppliers confidence to expand production. Under Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's acquisition transformation strategy, the Pentagon has also moved to simplify the procurement process, encourage second source suppliers, and prioritize commercially available solutions over bespoke defense products. But companies note that even if all the right incentives were in place, they would still struggle to overcome acute material constraints. Stewart of the NDIA identified shortages in areas ranging from rare earths and critical minerals, aka China stuff, China owns all of that, to explosives and specialist processing of chemicals, as well as shortages of skilled workers with the necessary security clearance. You know what would solve all those problems? If you organize your entire economy around that, or if you specifically designed your military industrial base like from the top down and said, you're going to design this, you're going to design this, it's going to cost this much, it's going to cost this much. Like, that's literally the only way to do it. There's a reason that in World War II we did not, put the reliance of like procuring munitions and like bullets and like missiles and all of that stuff. We didn't put that to the free market. You want to know why? Because that would have been fucking stupid and we wouldn't have been able to produce anything. They specifically set quotas for how all of these companies, all of these corporations were transformed into military factories creating tools of war, and they were told by the administration exactly how many they were going to produce by exactly what time. And that's why it was so effective. It's impossible to do this shit if you are living under a capitalist organization of society. NDIA survey this year suggested industry concerns over the burden of complying with government requirements were growing more acute, with 50% of companies citing it as a pressing issue compared with 23% last year. There are more bespoke requirements. You have unstable budgets, and then you have protracted timelines between when an award is announced and when there's an actual contract, she said. Jim Will, a director at Minnesota chip manufacturer Skywater Technology, said defense primes were also struggling to find domestic sources of microelectronics for their missiles. Thank you, Donald Trump, for getting rid of any sort of ability to produce chips on American shore. China thanks you. Xi Jinping gives you a firm handshake of gratitude. The electronics in Tomahawk missiles aren't 2 years old. They're 10 years old, 15 years old. But because of offshoring or other reasons, the U.S. fabrication plant that built that chip 10 years ago isn't around anymore. As part of its production push, the Pentagon is turning to a new generation of defense groups that rely more on commercial technologies and practices. The government announced framework agreements last month with 4 companies: Anduril, Co-Aspire, Leidos, and Zone 5. Sorry about that. To produce more than 10,000 low-cost cruise missiles over 3 years from 2027. Over 3 years starting next year. I guarantee you it won't start next year. It'll start in like 2030, and it'll take 10 years. That's how our military industrial complex works. If you're curious, if you want to get like real estimates, multiply every timeline they say by 3, and every start date add in also multiply that by 3. So if it says it's a year away, it's going to be 3 years away. If they say it's going to take 3 years, then it's going to take 10 years. That's how it always goes. William Greenwald, a former Lockheed executive and Pentagon official, said the goal was to make the U.S. defense industry more like Silicon Valley, focus more on speed, risk-taking, and continuing to develop products after they are deployed, rather than waiting for the perfect solution. This is how the defense industry used to work in the 1950s when it produced Silicon Valley in the first place, he said. Right now, we have a traditional side and a non-traditional side of the industry, and we need to bring the two together. Jerry McGinn, a former Pentagon acquisition official who is now director of the Center for the Industrial Base at the Center for Strategic and International Studies think tank in Washington, said the amount of money going to new entrants had increased dramatically over the past decade. They warned that without deeper procurement reform, these new companies would run up against many of the same challenges as their more established peers. Pettyjohn said another way for the U.S. to boost defense production would be to increase foreign production partnerships to overcome domestic bottlenecks and increase overall demand, spurring investment. AKA, just buy that shit from China already. Can we just have our entire military depend on China? I mean, it basically already does. Let's be real. But she added the Trump administration's preference for America first, America only for production makes that politically unpalatable for a lot of other nations. I suspect a lot of countries are going to be turning to alternative suppliers because they're going to be number 22 in the queue for a Patriot missile, she added. Yep, there we go. Our dysfunctional military industrial complex strikes again. This is so funny, man. I don't know. I mean, I guess there's not really that much of a point to doing I told you so's, but these are like really obvious I told you so's. So like I shouldn't take that much credit for them. Anybody who like does any sort of actual analysis of the realities of our production base should be able to easily come to the exact same conclusions that I am. But the reason that I do this is so that other people that maybe aren't as familiar with how all of this works, why it is so incompetent, and why it works the way that it does, aka the pedo billionaires, the Epstein affiliates, making ungodly amounts of money from this. Like, I'm trying to explain to people how this happens and why it happens, and to also say like we can chart a better course. And I'm not saying chart a better course as in like I don't want us to start producing missiles effectively, to be honest, because I don't want us to be in endless wars. Like we could just take all of this money though, all of this trillions of dollars that we spend on this, and instead of funneling it into the hands of a few pedophiles at the top of our society, we could instead take that money and use it for us. We could use it. We could get Medicare for all 10 times over. Literally everybody in this country could get free healthcare forever if we just took $100 billion out of that budget, right? Out of that annual budget. And to be honest, it's probably less than that. When you cover for how much we'd save on the back end with people not getting sick. But, you know, whatever. Like the actual estimates, I think, are anywhere from $25 to $100 billion a year. So I'm putting it at the high end. Just take $100 billion out of it and everybody gets free healthcare. Take another $20 billion out of it. Everybody gets free college. You know, like all of these things are very doable if we just take that money away from tools of death and move them towards, the things that benefit us workers, us citizens, because these don't, people. How much are you benefiting from our war in Iran? How much did you benefit from our war in Afghanistan? How much did you benefit from our war in Iraq? Not much, I'm guessing, unless you're like Mr. Lockheed or, Mr. Martin. I don't think that you benefited that much.